Good morning, Chairman Ellens and fellow commissioners. My name is Cullen Combs. I am the Emergency Manager for Doña Ana County and the City of Las Cruces. I'm here today to speak to you about what has been happening in our community since April 12th, with the influx of asylum seekers being deposited to us from the United States Border Patrol. Under Doña Ana County and the City of Las Cruces watch, we have not had a single person dropped off on the side of the road. Rather, we have created a shelter system that has met the immediate needs of mothers, fathers, children, essentially families coming into our community. The experience, training, and sharing of resources have been the backbone of our preparation and has made all the difference for this culminating event. I want to thank each of you for your support as we have been moving through this pretty fluid and I would say stressful event. And I believe that this is our finest hour as a community that I've been able to experience, and it's been a real privilege to be able to help lead this effort. Let us be clear, we did not ask for this, but we have stepped up and we are doing our best to do what is right. Make no mistake, this is a humanitarian crisis of epic proportion for our city and county. To our county and city managers, particularly Mr. Macias and Mr. Chuck McMahon and Mr. Blakuta, they have all been so supportive and given great leadership and direction as we've been moving forward to enable us to be able to do this operation. I appreciate each and every one of their efforts as we've been moving forward. We have to see the help. We see the help that you have provided in these first 11 days, and we know that you will continue to support our efforts and not forsake us. Let me give some details on what has happened thus far. I received the first call from Agent Combs here on the evening of April 11th, giving me what we would call a warning order, stating that they were going to start to have to shift operations and Border Patrol was going to have to do direct releases. I think Chief Hall will be able to speak to a little bit more in detail of why that policy change came about. 18 hours later, we received 141 asylum seekers. We had done some pre-planning the week before in possible anticipation of this happen, and that paid dividends, being able to set up rapidly and move through it. And for instance, we were able to use the Mearshite Rec Center for the first 4 days. That was difficult because we had to cancel events and that were pre-planned, and but we moved through it as a community, and then we had to transition out of there quickly as well because we wanted to restore those activities for the community members that were utilizing that center. Here's what we've received to date: 1,637 asylum seekers. We have a daily average of 146. We've had 30 transported to hospitals. Let me pause here real quick and emphasize that these folks that have been sent there are flu, cold type things. It's nothing traumatic or out of the ordinary that we would already not see in our community. I know there's been a lot of...
Chairman, can we please ask that the cell phones be silenced during this presentation?
Thank you.
Pardon for the interruption.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So as I was saying, the hospital transports have been, because these folks have walked 2,000 miles, you know, that's going to wear the body out a bit, but there's nothing that has been an exotic or out of the ordinary event as some of the things have been put out on social media. And also, particular thanks to the Las Cruces Fire Department, because after they've been released, they've been able to transport them back to the shelter locations and to receive that care that they continue to have. So, and we have medical staff that has been circulating at each one of the shelters to help some screening and moving through those events. So our average bed capacity is 180 per night, but we've had up to 240 with different shelters. And this is a point to make here. We are kind of perilously running close on our bed capacity right now. We are seeking out other opportunities to be able to open up other shelters and working with different cities throughout the state of New Mexico to help support the operation that we have going on here in Doña Ana County in the city of Las Cruces. Ladies and gentlemen, I couldn't have done this without these people listed on this slide here. Please take a look at this impressive list of names. Each one of these organizations represents dozens and dozens of volunteers. We couldn't have done this alone. This is a community effort, and these are our community partners which have stepped up and come in and work together in almost a seamless operation between government and non-governmental organizations, between our faith-based partners, the churches, and the community partners. We have been able to really take this operation that we couldn't have done alone, again, and be able to successfully take care of the folks that have been brought to our community. Look at this list. We have the Roman Catholic Diocese. They have really pulled through to help with travel and provide leadership and understanding of how this has worked. Because understand, while we have had this crisis since the 11th or the 12th of April, this has been an ongoing operation throughout our community without any government involvement for a number of years. However, with the numbers that we've now received, it caused us to then, as a government, come together and start to activate our emergency resources. The Gospel Rescue Mission. You know, I would call I'm going to talk about him in a second here, Steve. And Steve was the site manager. And every time I called him to say, hey, we got another inbound, he would answer, and he sounded like he was, had been awake for 4 days, and that might have been a possibility. But he still, every time he said, yes, sir, ready to receive. And that's been inspiring. The Soup Kitchen, they've been able to provide meals throughout the different shelter locations that we've been able to have. And our faith-based community has really done an outstanding job. And I apologize because I probably missed some of the people that have been helping out, because there's a lot of unsung heroes on this. And I'll be frank with you, I've been working 100+ hours a week. But it's just been awesome seeing what they've been able to do. So real quick, I want to move us through our 4-phase model approach that we're doing right now. Our emergent phase was the call April 11th, and we knew that we had to activate our emergency operations center, get everything stood up, and so we started to move through that. And always within your initial crisis, there's a lot of what we would call thrash. And that's exactly what happened. But we still were able to ensure that shelters were able to house and move everyone through. And again, we did not have one person that was excluded from any shelter operations, and we were able to take care of everyone. Last week, April 16th through the 21st, the period that just ended, we were able to start to stabilize and get a pattern, a battle rhythm, if you will, on how we were going to be able to move folks through and successfully then get the what we would call throughput to be able to send them on the road and get them to their point of destination. Because when just to understand, when the asylum seekers come to us, they have documentation and they have a sponsor in the United States, and we're making travel arrangements for those asylum seekers. And I know some of you all have actually been at the shelter, so you've seen this operation, but it's pretty quick. It's pretty arduous, it's pretty fast moving, but we're also caring for them as we're going through that. Our next phase is to give more support to our faith-based volunteers and organizations as they continue to do great work they have done for the past 11 days. We are hoping to transition to start to figure out a partnership with that. And that's as you see up on the slide there, it's TBD, to be determined. There's a lot of unknown factors, and we got to ensure that we're keeping a balance to make sure that we're not going to leave any of our partners we've been working with, out of the cold, off to the side, whatnot. But we're moving together between government and our community partners to make sure that we can do this as a team to come in to this. And there's a lot of unknown factors, I'll be frank with you right now. Because we, as a community, as you know, this is not something that we would plan for. It's not something that we're designed to do. It's really, frankly, an unfunded mandate that we've had brought to us. Enough on that slide. Up here we have 4 individuals, really unsung heroes. And I'd like to highlight these 4 individuals, not to just sing their praises, but they really represent the hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people that have been volunteering and helping out with this. They're selfless people that have given so much time of their talents, and their human compassion and outpouring has been inspiring to myself and to those around them. This is not normal for our community, but these people have stepped up. Robin, Deacon Lonnie from the diocese, Steve from the Gospel Rescue Mission, and Mike from the Las Cruces Fire Department are representations of selfless service we have seen through Doña Ana County in the city of Las Cruces. The hours listed below each volunteer is mirrored by so many others throughout our wonderful community. So this is a snapshot from Execution Day 0, Friday, the 12th, till 1 week later to the following day. Robin Rice, by the way, she's a volunteer in my office. She doesn't get paid, and she's given me 129 hours of service. And she does it without complaint. And in fact, she doesn't have to do it at all. She's choosing to do this. There's no orders that I can give her. She just says, Cullen, what do you need? And she's really been stepping up. We'd now like to take a moment to thank the men and women of the United States Border Patrol. We know that they are seeing the mothers, fathers, and children as the first point of contact as they have entered the United States. They are first to observe the humanitarian crisis, and usually at its worst. I'd like to now give El Paso Sector Chief Aaron Hall the opportunity to address the commission.
Good morning. Good morning. Thank you, Mr. Combs. Can you all hear me? As you said, I'm Chief Patrol Agent, El Paso Sector, U.S. Border Patrol. That Border Patrol's El Paso Sector is a very large piece of land. It encompasses the entire state of New Mexico and West Texas out to Fort Hancock, Texas. A year ago, we were 6th or 7th busiest sector in the United States. Within 9 months, we had become the 2nd busiest piece of the southwest border. The only busier section of the border on the southwest border the U.S. Border Patrol works is Rio Grande Valley, which is in South Texas. And every day we get closer and closer to their numbers. I fear that soon we're going to be the busiest part of the border if you look at our statistics. We're facing an unprecedented influx of illegal aliens. And when I say unprecedented, I'm not talking about overall numbers. We've seen higher numbers before. The challenge that we see now is the demographic of this particular alien that we're catching. In the past, for decades, we were encountering single adults, predominantly males, predominantly from Mexico. Our facilities were built for that. We were staffed and trained and structured for that. We were resourced for that. Even when the numbers were high, very high, such as in 2000, we caught 1.6 million, we were able to deal with that in a fairly expeditious manner because Mexico is a contiguous country. The challenge that we face now is the majority of our aliens are from 3 Central American countries: Guatemala, El Salvador, and Honduras. These countries are not contiguous countries, and therefore we cannot return them quickly to their countries of origin. The demographics are different as well. Instead of the traditional adult male, we now have family units. And family units could be anything. It could be a father and a child, a mother and a child, parents with children, single parent with multiple children. The challenge with that is we're not really built to hold that for very long. Whereas single adults can be spread to different locations, they're adults, they can largely take care of themselves in terms of their individual needs. When you have family units, they have to be kept together. And you have children in those family units. And as Mr. Combs said earlier, when you travel a couple thousand miles to get here, it can take a lot out of people, both adults and children. So now our stations, and 20 years ago, we were lucky if we had juice and crackers for those in custody. Now our stations are looking more like Walmarts with diapers and baby formula and all kinds of food and snacks and things that we aren't resourced or staffed and don't have the space to hold. The challenge with that is when you understand that we are only the first part of the step in the immigration process for those who cross illegally. The U.S. Border Patrol's role is to patrol between the ports of entry. Nothing enters legally between the ports of entry. Therefore, whatever enters, we encounter and we arrest. Whether that's human, whether it's contraband, whether you're smuggling marijuana, smuggling avocados, smuggling exotic birds, whatever it is you bring between the ports, we stop it, we catch it, and we process it. But from there, if you're a human being, as these people are, each one of these numbers that you see, those numbers up on the screen, the numbers I can give you for what we arrest, each one of these people is a human being with his or her own individual needs. From there, they're not only entitled to relief, various forms of relief under the American law, we also have to apply certain types of immigration consequence to those who enter. And that's where the challenge occurs. Our role in the U.S. Border Patrol is to catch, process, and turn over to other agencies. For those people who are being prosecuted, we would give them to the U.S. Marshals and they would be prosecuted under U.S. federal law. For it is a crime to enter the United States illegally and has been since 1929. And we've been prosecuting people for that since 1929. If it's simply a removal, we process those people and turn them over to ICE. You all have heard of ICE, Enforcement Removal Operations, ICE ERO. They actually are supposed to take the aliens from us and either place them in detention. If they don't have room in detention, release them on their own recognizance. And they have various programs to do that. The ankle bracelets, the alternative to detention. There's different programs. They're testing new things to track. But traditionally, before the numbers got so high, people who crossed the country illegally, when were caught by us, were given to ICRO and held in detention pending their immigration proceedings. If you're an unaccompanied alien child, you are under the purview of Health and Human Services, an office called the Office of Refugee Resettlement. Unaccompanied alien children that we encounter are processed and turned over to ORR. That is the way the process is supposed to work. The challenge is that ICRO does not have bed space. They are way underfunded for bed space. That is why so many people for so long in this particular demographic have been being released on what we call their own recognizance, colloquially referred to as NOR. That's been going on for quite some time. Health and Human Services is also challenged for space to hold these unaccompanied alien children. They cannot be released on their own recognizance per law and per court decision, so they have to be held by us or by ORR for as long as it takes to find them space. What you're seeing, ladies and gentlemen, in recent weeks, April 11th, I believe it was here in Las Cruces, was that we finally reached the point where ERO's capability to take the aliens from us that had been arrested and processed and ready to be handed over, they could no longer take them from us. We were reaching the point where our cells, our stations, our capacity throughout the sector, got 11 stations in El Paso sector, 7 in New Mexico, 4 in Texas. There was no place to put them. This was not unique to El Paso sector. Rio Grande Valley sector in South Texas, Yuma sector in Southwest Arizona were facing similar situations. The decision was made at a national level that we could no longer continue to hold people if ICRO couldn't take them from us. That was when we started releasing people on their own recognizance. We started doing it in El Paso, and we started doing it in Las Cruces. The challenge for us in my career, I've never seen that. I've never had to give such an order. And it shows how difficult the process has become, the immigration system, the border security situation has become. Our role is to enforce the law. It is to protect the people of this town where I grew up, Cruces High, New Mexico State, the whole bit. I'm from here. I know what it's like here. I remember growing up in the 70s, 80s, and 90s when aliens were running around, before we took the control that the U.S. Border Patrol has placed in this part of the southwest border. The challenge is these kind of aliens are not trying to evade us. The bulk of these family units are walking right up to us. They know the relief that's entitled to them under the immigration system, and it's overwhelming our ability to process it. We've talked a lot to Congress. We get congressional tours a couple times a week. We have elected officials from all over the country coming to see us to talk about this problem. But until we address the immigration laws that encourage these kinds of things, the numbers, Mr. Combs' path forward, they're going to continue to go up. Our traffic continues to increase at an accelerating rate. As long as people believe they're going to be able to enter the country illegally and remain here, they're going to continue to do it. And why is that? Going back to the ORs I was just talking about. When the system is this overloaded, we cannot get them to their hearings fast enough. There are not enough immigration judges. I already talked about the bed space. There's so much stress on the system that you have a variety of people that continue to exploit that. You have these poor people that legitimately are seeking jobs in this country. Some of them are actually seeking asylum. It might surprise you all to know that when we catch them, most of them do not express fear of returning to their country. That's usually expressed later in the process. However, we are well aware of the fact that many people do and are entitled to asylum once they go through the process. The challenge is when the system is this overloaded, everyone's being released on their own recognizance, and the majority of people that we're releasing do not appear for their first court hearings. So what you have is people who are legitimately entitled to relief in this country being bottlenecked behind people who are claiming it because they know they're going to be released. It is an immigration challenge that can only be fixed by law. I continue to ask for resources, as does ICE, as does HHS, as do all the entities in this process. There are things we can do to add consequence for illegal entry, but the challenges that we face are so great that our ability to control this is really mitigated by the pull factor. And the countries they come from are not necessarily pleasant places to be. Anybody who knows the history of these Central American countries since the 70s knows that to varying degrees it's been difficult where they're from. This country is an attractive place for them to be, and they're going to continue to come in ever-increasing numbers as long as the immigration system allows them to do that. Now, the challenge that we have in the U.S. Border Patrol is that these are only part of the people that we're encountering. This is only part of the threat that we're facing, because we are so tied up with these family units that are coming in. I don't have the resources across this portion of the border to protect it as well as we need to. Family unit is one conversation, making sure we get their human rights, making sure we get all those things. We speak to each one of these people. We take their biometrics. We figure out who they are as best we can tell. We determine whether or not they have a criminal record in the United States. But in terms of, I saw some reference to people being vetted, that's about as far as it goes, folks. We know who they are biometrically, we know their names, and as far as we can tell, they don't have criminal records here. That's about as far as any vetting process. There is no vetting process other than what I'm explaining to you. And in terms of asylum and refugee status, again, that's not really what we hear when we catch them. That's something that's usually claimed later on in the process after they become more familiar with it. But regardless of whether they're claiming that or not, these people are being released pending a court hearing with a judge that may not occur for years. The challenge is, like I said, most of them don't report for them. So while we're trying to make sense of all this and trying to manage it in the most humane way that we can, I have to think about the drug smugglers that are coming in right behind these family groups. When I get a group of 357 of them in Sunland Park, which we had last week, for example, that ties up a lot of the few resources that I have. What's coming behind them, I have no idea. I don't have the agents to properly patrol the border as I need to. I don't have the agents I need with this amount of family units coming in to protect y'all from the criminal gangbangers that are coming in. MS-13, we catch them here. Pedophiles, catch them just about every day. These people are coming in at the same time these family units are coming in. The threats are very serious. Since FY18 here in El Paso sector, we have caught aliens from 60 countries other than the Northern Triangle countries, those three I mentioned to you in Mexico. 60 countries other than that in the last fiscal year and a half. Countries such as Iran, Iraq, Pakistan, China, Russia, Turkey. We catch people from a lot of countries that we're not so sure we want them here. The challenge is these family units are straining everybody's resources. The city of Las Cruces, the city of El Paso, all of us who pay taxes into this process are paying to try to help understand and make sense and provide humane treatment to these people. But what I worry about while we do that is the other threats to this country that are in no way being diminished by it. Matter of fact, are being really exaggerated by the fact that we're so tied up with this. So I appreciate all the people of this good town, all the good people here. I'm sure I would probably know some people in this audience, or certainly their families. I've been away for a while, but I'm glad to be back, trying to do everything I can to protect this area, as do these people here. Although one of them's a Mayfield graduate, I'll forgive him for that. But that's it in a nutshell. I just want to make sure you have a balanced view of this, because this is how we look at it every day. Our humanitarian role, we have to counterbalance against the threats to this country that are coming in literally 24 hours a day. If y'all have questions, I'd be glad to answer them.
Chief Commissioner Gonzalez.
In your reconnaissance of releasing these individuals, what's the percentage of them reporting back?
Well, the number that the local ICE field office director gave me last week was that 96.7 of them do not report for their first hearing.
Mr. Chair? One of the questions I had is, I was wondering who pays to get them back to their sponsor? Who's responsible for paying for all that?
Well, ma'am, that's not something that we really deal with. We have kind of a unique relationship, though, between the federal government and the non-governmental organizations, these charities that are going out of their way to try to provide care for these people. We don't really get involved in the financial aspect of that. We coordinate with them here, as we do in El Paso and other areas. Excuse me, as we understand it, they're receiving donors or funds from donors to help these people continue on their path to wherever they're going to go to potentially await their immigration hearing. But we don't get involved in any of the funds.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, Commissioner Solis, from our experience, it is the sponsors that ultimately are paying for the cost of transporting to wherever the sponsor is located. Where the county and the city have been very engaged, and the non-governmental organizations have been very engaged in terms of arranging the transportation, but it is based on either reimbursement or direct payment by the sponsors for these individuals to travel to their final destination.
Thank you for that. Appreciate it.
Mr. Chair.
Commissioner Sanchez.
Mr. Hall, you had indicated that part of the issue that you're having, or with, not only is it the large numbers that are coming across, but you don't have enough immigration judges to see them.
Sir.
Why is it just we just don't physically have enough in the system, or are they just so many vacancies that have not been filled? I guess, where is it the issue that we're just getting overwhelmed, or we just also don't have judges on top of that?
Well, I think the answer is both. Now, I didn't talk about immigration judges. They're actually part of the Department of Justice, part of the Executive Office of Immigration Review. Border Patrol is part of CBP, which is part of DHS, but they too play a key role in this situation. Because again, each one of these people is an individual. Each one of them has an individual scenario, individual story that they will explain to the immigration judge, and he or she will decide whether they will be allowed to remain or whether they'll be removed. That takes time. And it takes time to get them on the docket and get them actually moved through the process. I've seen, and I can't speak for them, but I have seen reports of them trying to hire as many as they can. But see, that's a challenge that we all have, sir. We're understaffed here in El Paso sector, not only in terms of U.S. Border Patrol, but in terms of ICE resources. Already talked about the bed space. There are not enough people with this new changing demographic, with this influx. There are not enough people in the federal government system to move this process quickly, and not enough resources because it costs a lot of money.
And the other question I had was around, you had mentioned, and I can appreciate what you had mentioned, when they're, when you're having so many of your agents having to stop them, and there's always possibility of other people coming in. are they crossing illegally mainly because they're not able to, because of the lines of the backlog to request asylum at the ports of entry?
Well, I can't speak for the ports of entry. That's a different component under CBP. I can talk for between the ports of entry, but the fact of the matter is, if we do talk to these people, of course, Border Patrol has an extensive intelligence network, the individual processing agents. The people that we talk to will tell you how they got here. Most of these people that we're catching here in El Paso sector are from Guatemala. Increasingly, recently, our numbers from Honduras are going up a little bit. But like the typical family unit, large volume family unit, like we were catching in Antelope Wells, for example, and we're still catching out there, although the groups fortunately have slowed down a little bit. Those people made arrangements all the way in Guatemala. They traveled up through Mexico by bus, and the people that they're arranging with are smugglers. Nobody enters the United States illegally from the Mexican side without paying somebody. The same cartels that y'all hear about on the news, Sinaloa, La Linea, all these organizations, they control certain parts of the border. And it doesn't matter who you are or what your intentions are, you do not cross that border unless you make arrangements with somebody. So whether these people made the arrangements themselves or someone made them for them, family members, a point of contact, in Central American countries, you have smugglers advertising on the radio that they will help you get to the United States. These are all smuggling arrangements, and so they're paying people, and the sad thing is, smugglers are making money off of these people. You know, people that are coming here for a better life or fear or whatever their intent is. Smugglers are making a lot of money off these people, and the challenge for us is they no longer have to enter the United States. Like, to go back to your question about port of entry, excuse me, the people we're catching, most of them aren't even attempting to go through a port of entry. We're seeing buses dropped in Juarez, and the guide or smuggler gets out and just simply points north, and they start walking north across the river. We host a lot of tours, media, congressional representatives. When we're out on the line just showing them the area we're working in, we'll have groups walking up to us. That's how easy it is to cross. But somebody is paying for that right to do that, because the kind of people that control the border on the south side are not nice people. I'm sure y'all have seen the news of what they do to each other. Somebody is paying for this, and somebody's making a lot of money off it. The problem is, when the smugglers don't come into the U.S., we can't prosecute them because I can't get my hands on them. So to go back to your question, port of entry, I can't speak for them. I can't speak to how many they're moving. But these large groups we're getting 200 and 300 at a time, they're being dropped south of the line, and they're walking north.
Thank you.
Sir.
Mr. Chair,
Madam Commissioner Solis.
one of the questions I have is, what are the reasons that we are seeing asylum seekers coming here? What has happened? What are those reasons?
Well, it's like I was talking about. You look at the demographics of the last few years, and I'll give you all some stats. I told myself I didn't want to overwhelm you all with numbers, but I think it helps tell the story a little bit. If you go back to FY15, 4 years ago, a population that we were catching predominantly in terms of demographic was still your single adult Mexicans. Only about 26% of the people we were catching at that time were from other, what we refer to as OTM, other than Mexico. By FY18, 70% of our people were from countries other than Mexico. And so far in FY19, we're running about 90% of our aliens are from countries other than Mexico. Now, this demographic shift hasn't always occurred. As a matter of fact, if you go back historically, just about 6-7 years ago, most people that we caught from these same Central American countries there were some notable differences. They were single adults, and they were not expressing fear of return. At some point along the process, people have figured out, whether it's their smugglers, whether it's their lawyers, whether it's they on their own through education, whether it's the radio ads in Central America, somewhere along the line, ma'am, the aliens figured out that if they claim fear and if they come as a family unit, they're going to be allowed to remain in the United States. So when you hear us on the news or you see reports of where the government officials are saying we need to address these laws, we want is a fair process so that people who are legitimately entitled to this can get it, but that it doesn't encourage people. And the analogy I use is like a welfare office. You have people legitimately entitled to those benefits. But if all of us decided to take a shot at it and get in line ahead of them, it would not only prevent them from getting the benefits, but it would clog up the system with people who really shouldn't be in that office. And that's what's happening. We have so many people this last 6-7 years, suddenly, same countries, same dynamics, but now people are coming with family members. We'll have MS-13 gang members bring children with them thinking that we're going to let them go. Now, obviously, we're going to prosecute them and we have to separate the child. But especially with the executive order that we're under, if you come as a family unit, you're going to be treated as a family unit, regardless of where in the process it may be figured out whether or not you have a legitimate claim. And when you're treated as a family unit, as I was explaining earlier with the lack of detention, they're all being released. And so they're continuing on their way to North Carolina, Wisconsin, wherever they're going. So I think that's really what it is. It's an awareness that didn't used to exist of the fact, and there's another reason too, another significant development that occurred was the expansion of a court decision that in 1998 was intended, it's called the Flores-Reno decision, and it was intended to protect unaccompanied alien children because they're the most vulnerable population. Well, in about 2017, that decision was extended to cover all children in custody. So now all family units have to be treated differently, different than even that court that lawsuit was originally intended. That has also limited our time we can hold them in custody, because if the system works perfectly, we arrest them, we hold them in custody, they get to see the judge, they plead their case, yes or no, and then a decision is made whether they go back or they stay. But when they all go, because of some of these laws, the loopholes, and these court decisions, now everyone's released.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Any further commission comment? Cullen, do you have anything further to present?
All right, y'all, thank you.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to thank Chief Hall and the men and women of the United States Border Patrol for their hard work and this really difficult time. Just one last slide here. This is where we're at, and this is what we're trying to figure out right now. How do we balance this out with our unfunded mandate that we've have presented to our community, and working with our faith-based and community partners, being able to figure out how we continue to do what we're doing to ensure that no one is, regardless of what policies are, I'm just not going to let a kid be on the side of the road. That's my bottom line. And we're trying to figure out where and how we do that in the smartest way possible as we're working through current operations where we're every day receiving about whatever that number was, 146 per day. So that's where we're at, and I stand also for your questions at this time.
Chair. I just want to add, Mr. Combs and Chief Hall, I appreciate the way you all have been working together to make sure that everything's as coordinated as best as we can. I want to extend my thanks to Mr. Macias, Mr. McMahon, Mr. Pokuda, and everybody else, all the volunteers that have really helped over the last couple of weeks in the situation and stepping up from the community level. So thank you.
Commissioner Solis?
I'm just going to say thank you for your presentation. I appreciate your time this morning and all those involved. Thank you for being here.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for the work that you're doing. It's terrific.
Yes, Mr. Chairman. So,
Is there any public input? Oh, Commissioner Reynolds.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Colin. You know, I want to point out one other organization that's really pitched in from the county supports, and that's the South Central Regional Transit District. They've done a lot of transporting when on the weekends when CBT hasn't delivered the immigrants. They've actually brought them up, so I think they should be recognized as well. And I'm also very proud and to be a part of this community, and I think we should all be proud. We have, when people come across the border, we have several choices we can make. Obviously, if the system's not working, then we have to make different choices than the system taking care of that. And in our community over the last week, every person that I've met and spoken to the person has stepped up to say, you know, what are our choices here? And I think we all have to ask ourselves this question. You know, people are coming across the border, whether they're coming through the border crossings or they're coming, you know, in other places, they're still coming. And as humans, we have to decide what is our responsibility for this and what can we do. I do applaud everyone who's been involved with this. Until we determine the true nature of what their goal is and why they're here, we are obligated to protect our community, protect the people coming across, and to be humanitarian at the same time. We can't ask them and say, and make a judgment because we're not legal as to whether they're illegal or if they're coming across correctly. So we have to look at the community and say one thing. What if we do not take care of them? What happens to them then? Whether they're dropped here, they're dropped in La Mesa, they're left at El Paso, they would be in the community, and it would still be a burden on the resources that we have. This is a real issue. And I can tell you that if we just allowed women and children to be on the streets and not taken care of in this situation, that we would sooner or later would be getting calls from every person in the community about what are we doing. So as you consider this situation where we are today, I would appreciate if everyone would understand that we as a community are trying to step up to try to eliminate what we consider to be a crisis for our community and a crisis for the people we're trying to help. So again, I think I'm behind the efforts from the city of Las Cruces, all the volunteers, I'm behind the county, and everyone who stepped up to provide the extra hours, the extra resources and the time, and the volunteers to make this the best situation we can for the time being. And I would welcome everyone to continue to be involved at whatever level that you can, so we can do what is best for everyone, including ourselves and the people coming across the border. And for that, I thank you all.